Thanks, John. I appreciate you and I appreciate this group. This Anybody that's new, I want to say I'm Benny, I'm an alcoholic. And anybody that's new, hang around here. This is a good meeting and a good group and a good fellowship of the Spirit. There's many things that happen and lives are changed here for sure. Um, all right. The I'm going to try to stay on topic because I'm not good at that. Um, So the topic is it works, it really does, you know. And I got to go back to the start of my sobriety where I was so like Ali talks about being broken and I totally get that, that's the word, broken. And I did not do life very well at all. Um, and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired of being a loser, and did not know any way out whatsoever. But my little sisters, 6 months prior or so, like that, reached out to a substance abuse rep in Oshawa at a GM plant, Ernie, and he gave her direction or suggestions and more directions actually to keep doing what she was doing. And what she was doing was flush my drugs and then put a little piece of paper in my pocket while she did my laundry and that. I don't remember living there, but I worked and I drank. I like people say, yeah, yeah, do you have a problem drinking? No, I don't. I have a cash flow problem, but I don't have a problem drinking. I can go on and on and on, given the right certain amount of circumstances and drugs and everything else. But anyways, and I didn't even know I was alcoholic. And so she got me to phone AA, and I phoned them, and they asked me what my problem was, and I didn't know what my problem was, you know. And I said, well, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a junkie. I stick needles in my arms and that. They never asked me about my drinking. And so they couldn't help me. They sent me to a fellowship that didn't exist there at the time. So anyways, time goes on and I get more sick. And finally, I remember I was working. I still able to work, which is amazing. I was more like a robot than anything else. I used to put up drywall in houses. And I almost fell through the second floor down to the basement because I was so hungover and so sick, so sick. And I slept probably an hour at night at the most. And anyway, I crawled from the floor, from the hole. I'm in the hole actually. I'm holding on to the floor, and I crawled up and I got to the pile of drywall and sat there, and I pulled that little piece of paper. Now my sister had moved away 6 months ago, and somehow I pulled that little piece of paper out of my pocket, and I said to the guy that I was working with, I says, "Do you know where this is?" I says, "Yeah, I know. It's right around the corner." And I says, "Can you take me there?" I said, "I can't do this no more. I can't do this no more." So they sent me to. I went to see Ernie, and it was just before Christmas. And I guess he thought if I don't do something, this guy's gonna die. And they sent me immediately, almost within a week, I was in Buffalo, New York. I don't know how they got me across the border. I had warrants for my arrest galore. And I went to Buffalo, New York, a place called Brylin. And I was there. And the first few nights I was in detox, and then they sent me upstairs before just I think Christmas Eve. And because there was no more staff, everybody wants to go celebrate Christmas and whatnot. So they sent me upstairs to the fourth floor, which is a treatment uh, thing. And I know nothing about this. I don't know anything about it, okay? And they had a meeting that night, and I remember there's one of the patients there had a seizure, and they moved the meeting to another room like it was nothing. And I thought, well, this is weird. And so the next night, though, they said, who wants to go to a meeting downstairs? There was a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous. And nobody wanted to go. I had I need somehow my intuition told me you gotta go. You know, we have this thing about intuition. That's why tonight I said it works. It really does. It's about intuition. And we had that before many, many times in my life. That little mental faculty that we have called intuition was there. I failed to listen to it many times. They call it the little bell, the little warning sign, and all this stuff. It's actually, that's what it was. It was my intuition. And I was going the wrong way. Anyways, that night I went there and I heard these two guys explain their life. And the guy had been clean and sober for 2 years, and he had never seen his daughter. He had a daughter, and she was 2 years old, and he had never seen her. And he was over 2 years of sobriety. And so that hit my heart. That went straight to my heart. I thought this is weird that you would stay like that. You would keep on going in the right direction when things are not going in your direction, you know? Anyways, um, and the other guy did the same thing. So they gave me that night, I believe, hope was born in me for the first time in a long time. I remember around 26 years old. This is 29 years old, okay? And at 26 years old, I gave up trying to quit. I really just wanted to die. If I could, please just let me die, you know? And it just wasn't happening. Anyways, so that was December 1987. And it was right before Christmas. I remember thinking, I want to phone my mom and tell her I'm okay. See, my mother used to cry at night, not knowing if I was dead, if I was dying in a ditch or somewhere, a John Doe. And I would pop up from time to time through the years. And they say, oh, we saw him. We saw him, right? Or I'd show up sometimes at a wedding, my sister's wedding, I think not even a year before. But of course, I'm in a tuxedo to my sister's wedding, and I was like the show, the show must go on type of thing. But anyways, that night, I hope was born. And the next week or whatever, within the next, not even a month, because I didn't stay there a month, there was exercises that they asked me to do. They asked the whole class. And they said, I want you today to write your obituary. And I said, that's easy. And I wrote good riddance. That's how much I thought of myself. The next day or so, somebody came into the class and she said, now today I want you to look in the mirror and then write out what you see. And she walked out of the class. And I followed her to the kitchen, and she was making the tea. And I remember saying to her, lady, I know I'm in the right place. I think I'm in the right place and that. But what you're asking me to do, I cannot do. I cannot do. I could not expose my inside. My was so broken that I could not write it out. Well, I'll probably go in totally in psychosis or something, you know. Um, so she said, "Well, thank you for your honesty," and left me alone with that. And in that treatment, I found a poem called your The Man in the Glass, and I started reading that every day. And I followed direction that they were talking about in that treatment. I knew I was in the right place, and I had a very big spiritual experience. I think it was that night where everybody was wanted to party, and I was not in the party mood at all. I went to my bed, and on my bed, all of a sudden, I start falling in this darkness of darkness, and I can't stop it. And I'm trying to yell for help, and nobody's coming, and I keep falling. And all of a sudden, I said, "Please help me." So I live today. I know now that it was real. Two big hands came alongside of me, lifted me back up out of this darkness, and lay me down on the bed. And a voice said, "You have to beg." That voice I had heard before. It was a voice where I was crawling to my room where I rented a room, And from whatever I had done, I came to and I was crawling to that room, and a voice said, "You have to give this boy back to his mother." And it was the same voice as that. And I thought, well, I didn't know what to do with that at the time, right? So just leave. So I went through that treatment, and they told me, there's not. I remember there's nothing that a drink or a drug will make any problems go away or any life any better or whatever. And they told me to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to Oshawa. Went back to Oshawa. It was GM Town. I got three sponsors. They told me to get sponsored. And I did not trust myself. So therefore, I got three sponsors. Okay. And guarantees, right? And they were all within a year and of sobriety and that. And I went to meetings, went lots of meetings, 13 meetings a week. And what I heard was put the plug in the jug and keep clumbing back and things will be okay. And that plug in the jug was not working for me at all. And two times I had slips where I went out and had no defense whatsoever. And I thought, I didn't want to do that. 3 months later, again. And I said, something's really wrong with me. I didn't want to do that. I like you people. I go to your coffee shop. I go to your meetings. We have I have hope. I don't know what's going on here, but I know there's something good here. And nobody is bringing up the big book because there's no big book meetings around. There was all open meetings and 12 and 12. So anyways, then I heard somebody speak and he spoke about the big book. And I remember at that meeting saying, that guy knows what he's talking about. I need to talk to that guy. So that intuition again told me to go ask that guy to be my sponsor. And instead of going to 13 meetings a week all the time, I started going and hanging out with him where he went. And I started doing it. He said, I'm going to, and at first he said, we'll have a coffee and talk about it. So we had a coffee and talked about it, and he agreed to be my sponsor. And then he said, I'm going to ask you to take actions that I know you believe are not good for you, but I want you to take them anyway because they're in the big book. And this book is about 100 people who have recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. See, oh boy, did I identify with that. I really identify with those words. So so I didn't even know I was alcoholic because nobody really defined the problem yet. It's defined in the first four chapters of the big book, but nobody was talking about the big book, right? Nobody was defining the problem. So anyway, so he did. And then I was on fire. And I met other guys that we had started that fellowship down there because people in AA had started a women's treatment house, and they wanted us to put a Narcotics Anonymous meeting down there. But I was going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and some people said you don't belong here, this stuff. But I didn't have nowhere else to go, so I kept on going there. But I didn't know I was alcoholic either. I know my father was alcoholic. I know my aunt and everybody else. I got long come from a generational curse of alcoholism. And to me, it turns out to be a blessing. So, anyways, I, uh, we did this thing with the ladies that were helping ladies and treatment and stuff like that, and we put on meetings there, and we became really, really interested in this big book, and really interested in well, Joe McHugh. And we went, and my sponsor brought me to a conference. I'm not sure if that's the one that I heard CC from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, and Mildred knows this guy really well. So, and this guy talked about, like he had there was a period of time in Alcoholics Anonymous where he stayed away from the program. Then he really, really needed to apply the big book in order to recover again, to not from alcohol, from self. And man, he got my attention too, right? And these speakers at the conferences really got my attention. They were powerful people, you know, and they showed me the old timers. I start gravitating. Somehow my intuition was helping me gravitate towards old timers. One guy was Bobby Dobson. Oh, what a beautiful blessing it was just to sit beside that guy and have a coffee and conversation with him. Uh, I have a sponsor, by the way, and I guess I should have said that at first, but my sobriety date is June 25th, 1988. I have a sponsor and I sponsor people. I believe in the big book, big time. They call me religious and everything else like that. I don't go to church, but they call me religious anyway. And but either God is nothing or is everything or he's nothing, and God is everything to me. It comes first. That's my first things first is God, and that's because of good sponsorship. And that sponsor I had, showed me that. And he showed me something. He said, he used to say to me that his sponsor had told him, let yourself be loved just the way you are. You know that thing about the mirror in the treatment center? That came back right away. And I said, I can't do that. I can't let you guys love me. I don't know me. So I didn't, I felt very unlovable. And might have had to do with my childhood, my upbringing, and all this stuff. That's another story altogether. But the thing is that I, he told me that, and I was thinking of an experience today because he told me to read the big book, see where you identify with what is written, and then do what it says to do. And I did. So I took the steps in my first years of sobriety and results. Oh my God. You don't, I cannot describe in this amount of time how broken I was and how messed up of a person I was. But when I got that and I took inventory and the ones on my list were the worst ones, and I did the steps in order, and I got to the step 8 and I had these two people, and one of them was my father, which if my mom would have said, please don't. See, the reason I was not ever home and I was homeless and that, because I would never go back home. Because I almost killed my father, and I was gonna. And if she didn't say the words that she said, because he was beating her, he was he was not a nice man, but he was sick, and I didn't know he was sick with the same alcoholism I had. So, anyways, I have to make amends. I had to think about that. And it says in step 8, we got to think about these things. So it took me a long time with my father and another guy. I knew what I had done because I cursed him to anybody that would ever hear. So one day I go into a coffee shop and he walks in at the same time as I'm walking out. That guy was lived in Quebec and all of a sudden he's in Oshawa at a coffee shop. So I waited till he came out and I knew what I was going to talk to him about. I had talked behind his back and stabbed him behind his back for all the years because his wife had blown her head off, and she was a friend of mine because she could not get away from this guy. And that put a lot of hate. And that's all I had before. When I came to you, all I had was a blackness and a darkness and a hate that you wouldn't believe in this. And so, anyways, when he came out, I said, I would like to talk to you, you know, and I knew what I was going to talk about. See, the steps are in order. And all of a sudden, my intuition was telling me, do it now, do it now. And I did. And I'm glad I did because what happened, I told him, I said, I've talked badly about you because of what happened to your wife and that. And I'm sorry that I bashed you, your character and everything else to anybody that I could. And I want you to let you know that it will never happen again. Okay. And he walks away. He walks away almost with the pack sack I had been carrying for years on my back. That resentment. Boom, gone. Does this work? It works. It really does. You know? So the steps taken in order for me, they work. They really do. But the thing is that we got so enthusiastic about this stuff, and I'm 12 stepping. I'm being reported to my sponsor, by the way, from other AA members because I'm 12 stepping winos in the park and carrying my big book and hot dogs and go and talk to them and all that stuff. And my sponsor was saying, he somebody said to him, "Oh, what?" They came to the table and they said, "Oh, I got it. I got it, Jones. I got it. I got this program, right?" Or something. And I said, "What did he mean by that? What did he mean by that?" And he told me, he says, "You don't have to worry about that, Ben, because you're doing it. You're doing it, buddy." And I didn't know what exactly the full extent of what that meant. I thought everybody was doing it, but not everybody does the steps or takes the steps, right? We were taking the steps and getting results. And a bunch of us went to Joe and Charlie in Toronto, 95. And boy, what an awakening of taking the steps that was, and really got some really, I start writing and inventorying and everything, right? And I got good results out of that too. I started doing the work. And such a freedom. I remember sitting in this little flat. I got a first apartment in my life at 30 years old. And I remember sitting there. Thing was, I had come back from a 24-hour Christmas meeting at the Alamo Club. And I remember sitting there listening to a song on the radio. Might have been Amazing Grace. It might have been Ave Maria. I'm not too sure. But I know I was bawling. And I said, I'm free. I'm finally free. I'm finally free. And the week before that, I had just done a fifth step. And there's the intuition thing again. I did my fifth step with a priest at Manresa, and I wanted to Father O'Brien, but his list was full. So I got this other priest that I don't know. And when I was done telling him the whole thing about my life, he turned to me and he says, "You are a disturbed young man. You need psychological help." That's exactly his words, right? And I said, "Oh my God, even the A can't help me." Because I wasn't going to tell you guys that. I've done a lot of bad things in my life. So, anyways, I go to the chapel there. There was a nice little chapel, and I sat there for a long time. And when that was again the intuition to go and sit there, and I sat there for a long time. On our fifth step, it talks about we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Well, this was almost backwards. And when I sat there for a long time, all of a sudden God showed me what the exact nature of my wrongs was. I was inconsiderate of what my actions or my inactions were towards other people. I didn't know that. Before that moment, I didn't know I was inconsiderate. And when God showed me that, I must have cried for about an hour to 2 hours sitting in that chapel. My life changed. My life changed because of the steps of this big book, this hopeless state of mind and body that I'm recovering from, right? And I got to keep on going. I made a decision. I remember coming to believe. I remember making that decision and saying, really, this is my decision. I was going that way before. Now I'm going this way. And because of that, I was shown a new way of living. And I started really gravitating towards old timers. And they were showing me books. They were showing me a new pair of glasses, Chuck C. That they showed me so much. There's so many things that they showed me, and I was like a sponge, and I still am. But what can happen is life happens. And I moved away to a small town where there was no AA in that. There was AA, but it was like one or five meetings and all discussion meetings and no big book and AA was dead. It was really dead. So in that town, I thought if I stay here, I'm going to die. You know. And I started reading that somehow that page 164. God will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. Ask Him, and He'll show you. And I did that, and He showed me. And it was a big party, and I did a gratitude supper actually, and nobody wanted to help whatsoever, but it turned out to be a really beautiful affairs. Members that I had been stopped going meetings for years came to that supper and enjoyed each other's company again, and it restarted AA in that town, right? And more tough stuff happens in life. Now, just bring you up to about 5, 6 years ago. I moved back. I moved to Midland because I've worked in psychiatric hospitals for the last 30 years, and I've enjoyed it. I love working with the clients. Um, I didn't know I was going to do that. I didn't know I was going to do that, but I ended up doing that. And to what am I? See, I lose my point all the time. Um, I got sick 6 years ago, and I broke my leg, and then I had cancer, and then there was other complications and everything else like that. It's been a rough 6 years. And I think just last year, Mildred was speaking or doing a class at Manresa. She was the presentation, and she woke me up. We had a little session, and she said something, and that's why I would love her to do a one good session on this one. I'll tell you. She said, "Respect yourself, Ben. For God's sake, respect yourself." Whoa, all my life I spent in corrections, being corrected, and I go to AA and be encouraged, and now I'm 36 years sober, and I'm told respect yourself. I had lost the respect of myself because I had fallen asleep again. I had fallen asleep again, and we can fall asleep right in AA, you know, and I did, and I didn't know it. Maybe it's the physical illness and stuff like that that happened that, and all of a sudden I'm not going to the meetings, I'm not giving as much, and well, I couldn't. I was physically like I was losing my lungs. 2 months ago, I had a heart attack, you know, and they put a stent in, and now my lungs are nice and clear. Finally found the problem, I don't take 2, 3 naps a day. I'm full of energy. I'm going, ooh, watch out, I'm back, you know. And the intuition was the thing with the intuition is that beautiful stuff. It revived in me goals and dreams that I had when I first got sober. I got away from it where I went up north and I was in service and all that stuff, you know. I was not away from AA. I was right planted in AA. And but the thing is that in here and in here, we can fall asleep. Service can become a medal or a trophy. All of a sudden, other things can become applause and all that stuff, right? And we start dying again. And for me, it was, and I needed get kickstart again. And Mildred, I thank you for that. And then that really opened a lot of questions in my mind. So my intuition guided me. All of a sudden, I'm listening to this guy, Bob O. And he's one of those Matt Cheater guy. Don Pritz was his sponsor, and all these guys that Mildred has met and that, and I've heard them, and I've met a lot of them, and meeting these people is something else. You have a chance of meeting these. They won't be around with us forever. So if you meet them, God, especially at the Fellowship of the Spirit conferences and stuff. Anyways, so I'm listening to this guy, and he goes on about taking inventory. You know what he took inventory of? He says principles. See, I never knew what exactly principles meant. I knew that people had I don't know where they got that, but the first step, honesty, second step, faith, hope, faith, and so on. He wasn't talking about that. He was talking about the foundations of your life. And Mildred opened up that session that weekend with a thing that I learned from Bob Proctor, which you were born rich. And he showed how what we are is like a bowl or a cup. And ideas about God, about yourself, about the world have been put in there. And some of them by yourself. But they're not necessarily true. And you have to look at that. And I didn't know how to take inventory of that. But when he showed me, it's just a talk on podcasts. When he showed me, boy, I started writing. Why is it that I think it doesn't matter if I live or die? Why do they think that I'm not good enough to do certain things? Why is it that I think, boy, oh boy, it has opened up a box of beautiful things because I'm going, man, I cannot wait. I was just writing stuff out and it was like, why do I always have to be on the lookout? Well, I grew up in an alcoholic home. And okay, thanks, John. So I grew up in an alcoholic home and I didn't know how to do this stuff. So what we have when I come into the house, I open the door and I got ears. If it's quiet, it's no good. If it's loud, it's no good. I'm always watching. I live on the streets many times, in jail. I would like go, crimes and stuff. You always got to be on the watch out. You always do. Well, this is ingrained in me, in my deeper mind. And when life happens, I react out of there. But nobody ever really showed me how to take inventory of those principles, those foundations of life that I have inside of me. And I didn't know, I didn't even know they were there. But when he talked about that, boy, I started writing like crazy. You know, why is it that, uh, oh, one is always don't get caught. Because as a criminal, I didn't learn how to do better. I just learned how to not get caught. What a crazy way of thinking and living. And how do I still apply that to my life? So I keep taking inventory. I pray and meditate on that, and the intuition comes in. It's a working part of our mind. And Mildred showed that at that weekend about we have sensory factors. We can see, we can hear, we can touch, we taste and all that, smell. But we have inner faculties, and those mental faculties need to be developed. And one of them is that intuition, that beautiful gift that they talk about in here. And so we come to rely on it, but we got to use it properly. And we used to grow in understanding and effectiveness. And as I'm doing this program, as working these steps, as I'm working it out, it happens. It will develop. It will grow and better. And then my prayer life took on a brand new one. My inventory life took on a new life, you know. And I'm so looking forward. Well, I was listening to a talk, and it was Mildred's 45th year anniversary the day before, and she was speaking at a women's conference, and whatever it was really good, and it was and I forgot what I was going to say about that, but I know I know that it touched me and it redirected me that for me and my prayer life and all of my life now I am I don't know what I was going to say. She said she had spoken and it was she just had the best 5 years of her life, meaning between 40 and 45. And I talked to her last night, and she's 52 years, and then it's still a great life. And she's still giving and it's exactly about that. It's about the other people. It's about giving. And all of a sudden, there's a lot of love that comes out. And there's a loving soul that these old timers for me have been exactly that. And I resonate with that. And we have such beautiful program. And anybody that's willing to take the actions to just start walking in a different direction. And I've got a beautiful little sign that says, if you find yourself going the wrong way, remember that God allows U-turns. And no matter how long in sobriety we are, remember that. Please remember that. God allows U-turns. I'm going to go through my steps again with Butch, who's my sponsor, and we both look forward to doing it again and again and again, because there's no end to spiritual experience. As long as we want to have them, we're going to have them. As long as we work for them, right? I don't know if I touched that subject enough on the, it works. It really does. All I can say, it worked back then to start off the craziness world that I was in and took me out of that world and put you in your world. And my life has been so blessed because of it. And then I fell asleep and then I picked it up again and it's happening again. And I'm looking forward to the next years of my life more than ever, more than ever. I'm just thrilled uh, with life and conferences and meeting people in Alcoholics Anonymous. It makes my day every day. I have a pattern for living. I remember this guy saying, it really works. Thank God I found a new way to live. And he would, and that's exactly what happened. And as Bob would say, stay a little longer, try a little harder. And that guy was just an angel. He was just an angel to us, in Oshawa. So I thank you for having me, and I hope that if you're here, please stay, work with these people. It works if you work it. Thank you.
Oh, Marilyn, let's come on in. Let's hear what you have to say. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Marilyn. I am an alcoholic. And that was so beautiful, Benny. It was just like a song. It was just flowing, and I could just really feel your spirit. And you said so many things that I really appreciated. But you kept talking about that intuition, right? And I try to be guided by intuition. 11 step tells me that God will inspire me and give me intuition. How do you know, or how did you first recognize it to be intuition, that you know it's God leading you or the spirit of your higher power? How did you know? How do you recognize it? And thank you so much.
Thanks, Marilyn. Well, how did I know? Well, because I was introduced to seminars outside of AA with Bob Proctor, and he talked about these faculties that we had. And he says you have these, and you feel. It was just a thing of putting God first, I think, and it was I would feel it, and I would go this way. There's many examples in my life that happen with that, and the most recent one was just a few years ago, and I was losing my house because of everything that was happening. And as I sold, as I babysat a dog for somebody, and they wanted to give me money, but I knew this person who was really struggling, and she used to walk her dogs in the backyard, and somehow God said, "Give the money, give the money away to that girl,"
Mhm.
right? And what I think intuition for me is now is obey. Just obey God's words, right? And He speaks. Yeah, I think He speaks to me, and that person really feels blessed. She needed pairs of shoes. Go and figure it out, right? She needed shoes to walk and work. She was hurting so bad, and she didn't want to say nothing. And when I said that, she was crying and said I needed shoes. And she was losing her car and everything else. And the next one, God said, I sold my house, and He goes, buy her a car. I go, wait a second here, you know? Whoa, that's expensive, man, you know? No. And God has been in that time at that when I talked about that party up north, that was all God. God said to me, this is weird. I want a party. And I love parties. And I thought, oh, that must be my head. No, no, no. It kept repeating itself. It won't leave me alone. And I said, I have to create the fellowship I crave. That's what I was praying about. When God was showing me a way. And He opened doors and He started doing stuff. And it turned out to be the most wonderful party. And as at the end of it, I was serving water and tea and coffee. And I felt such a beautiful feelings of awe of being a servant, just being a servant. That's how I felt it. That's really the feeling of wonder of that thing about God. That's been my experience. I have so many of them. It's all stories like that. Yeah. Thanks, Marilyn.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Benny. Thanks for the question, Marilyn. I'm gonna go to a question in the chat because if I don't, I'm gonna get distracted. I'm gonna forget about it. From Ginger, How did you notice yourself getting off track, and what did you do to get back on?
You don't notice. I did not notice that I was getting off track. It took a slap. Mildred provided that. It took a little a little rude awakening, as we would say, right? You know? And I didn't know. Because I was talking to my sponsor and he was telling me, well, you've been through a lot of stuff in the last 5 years. You've been through like everybody's going, but everybody's also going, but you don't talk about your cancer and you don't talk about this. You don't talk. I said, no, it's not my problem. See, I turn everything to God. So I don't talk about those things, but I do tell my sponsor everything. He knows me through and through. And he's telling me, you've been through a lot of stuff, you know. You should almost feel sorry for yourself or something, you know. But no, and going, how did I get back? Because of what Mildred said. And then when she showed that stuff on the blackboard that I knew back in the 90s, okay, I awoke. I awoke from a slumber, and I started seeking again. Even though, because see, I don't take drugs for pain or anything like that. I'm going, no, I'm not taking that. I like reality today. I like to be aware. And I think that's the goal of the 12 step is spiritual awakening and consciousness, a beautiful awareness. And that she talked about that all the time. And I believe just like her, that that's exactly what it's about. So yeah, I hope that answers her question. It's taking the steps again, by the way. It is going through the steps again and again every year, you know. Even though I was doing it, sometimes just talking about it is not enough. You gotta do it.
Thank you, Benny.
Thanks,
And
John.
thank you, Ginger. And for those listening, you couldn't see it, but Benny paused and waited for the intuition there before he answered. And I love that. Kelly, come on in.
Good evening, family. Kelly, a proud member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you so much for your share. I mean, you had me at the dreams. I am a dreamer, and I don't write them down. I was instructed to do that, but I get crazy messages. Not crazy, but it all seems to tie into spirituality. And sometimes I omit, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I don't pay attention. Um, but as I get older, and I have to say, I've been in and out of the rooms for 30 years. I'm coming up on 3 years now. So I've had my bumps and bruises along the way. Um, but what is your anchor? What is your anchor in terms of your spirituality and what you do on a daily basis?
Either God is everything or he's nothing, buddy. Kelly, it is just that to me it had to be that. See, I ran the show of my life. Stop playing God. That's what I had to do. I had to make a decision to do exactly that. And thank God for people who showed me the big book, you know. And yeah, so I had to stop playing God and put God first in everything. And I mean everything. And a lot of people say, well, you should be doing that. Why don't you do this? Never mind. God's on the job. Back off. Right? And that's how I live my life, you know.
Hey, thank you so much, Benny. And Mildred, I think we got time for you to take us out tonight. Come on in.
Okay. My name, Benny, thank you. I haven't heard you for a while. What a beautiful, I was just riveted to what you said. And, you know, the person who said it was like a song, and that's just the way it was. It flowed out of you, and it's been great to hear that and to see how you do life. So carry on. You're amazing. You know, if Max Sheeter and Cease Cargo and Chuck Chamberlain and that crowd were still alive, they'd pat you on the back. So I'll pat you on the back and say, keep going, bud. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you. Thank you, Mildred.
Thank you, Mildred. And Pat, I think we're finishing on time for the first time in FOTS history. So I'm going to take that as